Everyone knows about the Christmas Cavaliers. Cain and Abel, Lance and Alan, Kyle and Ford, Bowie and May, sure. Kaze and Saizo, I guess. Fram and Clan, okay. Oscar and Kieran. Was it Oscar and Titania? Maybe Leonardo and Edward? No, it couldn't be. Could it? The classic Christmas Cavalier Red-Green duo is an archetype that only exists in its purest form in a handful of Fire Emblem games. However, its importance and legacy does make it still argued about to this day. I don't know what it is about red and green units that act as counterparts to each other, but the community loves them. Or do they? With limited promotion items, often players will pick one and bench the other, and everyone will start drawing lines around their favorite. Try telling a Lance fan you're an Allen enjoyer, and you're likely to start the next ATA vs Allchrist. Not to mention, with the advent of Unit Feel, these growth-dependent units that start similar but have few key differences often only end up highlighting how many differences really don't even matter, especially when enemies are either too weak to matter or too strong for either unit to succeed. This is not a Unit Design 101, instead it's a more free-flow discussion about Christmas Cavaliers, the Christmas Cav archetype, what these units can teach players about the games they're in, and why I don't think the archetype is being played straight anymore. But first, a big shout out to LaguzGuard members C2 Piccoli and Enigmatic Mr. L. Thank you for supporting the channel. If anyone else wants to support, you can do so for less than $1 a month. And without further ado, let's get into the less scripted portion of this video. I want to talk a little bit about the various Christmas Cavs and Christmas duos and argued Christmas duos across the series, but primarily I want to come at it from a perspective of what can encountering and interacting with a Christmas duo teach a new player about the way their game works, or about, like, why is this a useful archetype? Because I think so often we get bogged down in the specifics of growth rates or the difference between one stat being higher than another, and we will talk about that when it's super relevant, but I think it's important to come at things from a perspective of someone who doesn't just have OifuBot or whoever bot telling them all of the stats and the readouts of a unit and, okay, which one's going to be more optimal long-term and all that stuff. I think if we take a look at the characters as they are, from a mechanical standpoint, I'm not really talking about character here, but from a mechanical standpoint, what do they teach a new player about the game? FE1, you have two Cavaliers, they both have slightly different stats, they both grow a little bit different. I honestly don't think Cain and Abel teach a new player all that much about the game. I think their importance for showing off a difference in growth rates is a little bit overblown, because both of them have very high growth rates, they're just a little bit different in certain aspects. And randomness will also cover some of that up. Bowie and May, or honestly Bowie and May are the more interesting ones in Gaiden. Luca and Forsyth don't really show you too much, because it's just showing, okay, what, one unit joining earlier than another unit can do. Big whoop. Bowie and May can show you, hey, different mages can have different spells, and they will learn different spells as you level them up. And so it gives you that sense of, oh, what are they going to learn? Because Bowie doesn't start with lightning, but he gets lightning in like 1 or 2 levels. So what's Bowie going to learn next? What's May going to learn that's going to keep her ahead of him? Gives you that little bit of interesting play of a mage with more spells and a mage who quickly learns that next spell. Mystery of the Emblem didn't really have too much. FE4, you have one Alec with Pursuit and Noish with Crit, I think it is. And so it teaches you, hey, units without Pursuit can't double. Units without Critical can't crit. And to get you paying attention to their skills, you also have Nihil on Alec, which does put him up as, hey, this unit is a little more interesting, because I think he can seem very underwhelming on his own, because he's doubling, but he's given an iron sword, and he can't really, he's doing, what, 5 or 6 damage a hit? Not too much. Thracia. Closest I can come up with is Orson and Halvin. Orson, Ocean, whatever his name is in the recent translation. And it teaches you the difference. Okay, one has Wrath, and the other, I forget if he even has a skill. Plus, Ocean gets a personal weapon, and Halvin gets a Brave Axe given to him, but it's not his personal weapon. And so it can teach you that some units are just better in this game. Some units have personal skills, some units have personal weapons. Personal weapons are great, personal skills are great. And to value them, I guess? I don't know, Halvin's still not a terrible unit, but he's not Ocean. So, I'm trying to think what else you can learn from it. I don't know what else you can really learn from the FE 6, 7, and 8 duos. They try to teach the weapon triangle with Sane and Kent. There are some meaningful differences later on, like going more in-depth between Alan and Lance, mostly with their speed stat tendencies. Again, random growths. But again, a brand new player is not really going to pick up on that right away. And then Ford and Kyle, yeah, there are differences, but again, brand new player is not going to pick up on them. Then you get FE9, and this is the start of Fire Emblem as a series. Really, like, if we had a really close trend of Christmas Cavaliers all through the GBA era, and then here we technically have them again with Boyd and Kieran. No, not Boyd and Kieran. Oscar and Kieran. What am I saying? With Oscar and Kieran as Christmas Cavaliers. I'm saying Boyd because in my head I just had a random thought. Boyd and Oscar are a little bit more similar to that Christmas Cav duo, red and green. One being hot-headed and strength-focused, the other being cool-headed and defense-focused. They're just in totally different classes. Granted, Kieran also fills in that same role to Oscar, and they know each other, and they have that connection, so it's almost like a second Cavalier archetype. We'll come back to Oscar. Oscar often plays the green man in almost everyone's attempted pointing out of Christmas archetypes. But what do they really teach the player? I don't know. I don't know what they teach the player, strictly speaking. Because, again, it's kind of just the same whole Christmas Cavalier thing we've gotten used to for quite some time now. Different stats, that's about it. Different personal skills. Kieran has Gamble, Oscar has no personal skill. Sure. Not really teaching the player much, aside from saying units are different. Radiant Dawn, again, not a whole lot going on. I've raised the potential that Edward and Leonardo could fill the role if you were really trying to force the Christmas archetype into Radiant Dawn. I don't believe Radiant Dawn has any true Christmas archetype, but then again, as I look back on this, I don't know if a lot of games have a, quote, true Christmas archetype, because what's the point? The Christmas archetype is something that I think is more fun for characters and more fun for the interplay between the characters than it is for actual gameplay, but there is still some gameplay merit, and that's what I'm covering here. Like I said, I'm not covering characters. Maybe I said in a bad take that I left out. I'm not covering characters, I'm just talking about gameplay perspectives. Going through the rest of the series, Kaze and Saizo. You have a fast ninja who with a low strength cap, and a strong ninja with a lower speed cap, more defense actually. Technically, Kagura has the higher strength, but Saizo is very risky with his whole pyromaniac skills. And Kaze, I forget what skill he has, but he's also the one who's always there for you unless you don't support him in Birthright. What do they teach the player? As a duo, not much. As individual units, Kaze teaches the player that ninjas are sweet. Saizo is kind of just another ninja. Saizo has some unique stuff to him. Don't kill me, Fates fans. I think I skipped some games though. Yes, I definitely did. I just jumped right there because Awakening has Sully and Stahl, which they join a chapter separated. Sully tends to be more useful, but Stahl can have a little bit more usability. But then again, it's kind of, they're generic. Generic in the sense of there's nothing totally unique going on about either of them. There's nothing that they're strictly teaching the player about. It's just they're just units with different stats. And maybe you can argue that they have different. Okay, here's something you can argue about them. Even though they are in the same base class, they have different alternate class options, I think. I'm going to look this up just to make sure that I am not full of myself. Yes, Sully can turn into Myrmidon or Wyvern Rider, and Stall can turn into Myrmidon or Archer. So you have differences in their reclass options, which is very important for Awakening, that different units will have different options available to them to reclass, and not all units will get every option. Because, if we step back a little bit even further, New Mystery and Shadow Dragon, the reclass options were pretty much locked in, and if you were in one class, then you could go to any reclass option that anyone else of the same class could get to. But I will say the DS version of Shadow Dragon is probably one of the most impactful differences between a Christmas Cav, because Kain has D-rank swords and E-rank lances, and Abel has E-rank swords and D-rank lances. And because of that one fact alone, Abel is far more useful in the early game. Because D-rank lances means you can use javelins. And using javelins means you can attack at 2 range. And attacking at 2 range means you don't have to go up against all those really strong hard 5 enemies in 1 range. And yeah, weapon triangle advantage does exist, but aside from the first 4 chapters, you're fighting very few axe-wielding enemies in Shadow Dragon, so you are wanting to have lances far more than swords. Very, very important teaching tool there. Let's go through the other games. I already talked a little bit about Fates. Shadows of Valencia, like I said, I think you still have some more, you have a little bit more push on Bowie and May. Again, same thing. Mages, not any more significant difference than Gaiden. Three Houses doesn't have this archetype at all. You can stretch and you can find some. I think the closest that I'd find is Fernand and Sylvain, kind of personality-wise. But again, that's not really teaching you about growths and differences in units because they're in different houses altogether. And then last but not least, we have Engage, where you get Clan and Fram, which is a weird combination of the Christmas archetype of red and green and the Yumina Yubello Kid Mages archetype. One's a healer, one's a mage. They both are kind of mediocre, but offer your army some things that they don't have at the moment. One being magic damage and the other being healing. And not just healing, but some actual decent support as well. Anyway, going back to the Christmas archetype, why the heck do players love it so much, and why do we fight over it so much, and why is this something that's appeared so much? Why red and green? It's classic, it's tradition, that's pretty much all. Cain and Abel are the platonic ideal of the Christmas Cavs, especially in Shadow Dragon with that weapon rank difference. That is a teaching moment for the player, that a weapon rank difference in the right game, and Shadow Dragon is the right game for weapon rank differences, can mean all the difference. And so, having two units that are similar but can teach the player that, very important, very good, very useful. I think a lot of these other forced archetypes are just slightly different stats, including the original Cain and Abel, and I don't think they really get that passed. Though I will say having multiple options in a good unit class encourages the player to use at least one unit in that class. Especially when you get one promotion item but not two, and then it forces the player to have to make a choice. And I think that those can be good for, if nothing else, player stories, but also slight encouragement of, hey, you have two of these units, you want to field at least one of them? You don't have to field both of them, but you want to field at least one of them? And it kind of creates some tribalism among people, which is the next thing I'll get into. Tribalism is rough. I don't subscribe to it. I apologize for anyone who I've ever made upset about any opinions that I have. I'm just talking about a video game. You don't need to take it personally. Just because, you know, if you like Alan more than Lance, if you like Lance more than Alan, Cain or Abel or whoever, I don't care. I don't care. I love Kyle. I never use Ford. I don't care. What I do care about is that a lot of people care. And a lot of people care a lot. And it's kind of weird. Like, people care about units in Fire Emblem, that's not too weird. But people care a lot about which Christmas Cav you are using, or are you using both of them? Modern times, a lot of people are like, you have to use both of them, unless they're playing a game in which they know for a fact you don't. But like, if they're both Cavs, everyone's like, you gotta use both of them, even if you can only promote one of them, and the other one you can't promote until like chapter 16 or whatever. But I think it is the player love and tribalism and connection to the archetype and to picking a side, which is why we're seeing it forced so much more, not just into games, but also into discourse about games. Why we're constantly trying to find the Cain and the Abel, the red and the green, in every game, even when they don't really exist, like in Radiant Dawn. I think we're trying to find this all so much, so actively, because people fell in love with it. People really like it. People really like picking the sides, picking the red and green, as stupid as it sounds. And I have to ask, is there really a purpose anymore? Because in all the games I mentioned, all the games I talked about, every mainline Fire Emblem game, what are the Christmas Cavs that really taught players anything that of import? Fire Emblem 4, Pursuit and Crit, different skills on different units. Fire Emblem 5, maybe, in that one of your units might just be far better than the other, but they're both still worth using because early game, you only got a lot of choices. Shadow Dragon, the importance of one different weapon rank, very important there. And I guess what, Awakening, that different units of the same class can have different reclass options. Of all the Christmas pairs that we have, are those really the four most important ones? The most important things they can teach us? Because if so, I think we've been forcing the archetype far more than it deserves. But that's not to say I hate it. I think it's charming. I think I kind of like it. And maybe you can call me a hypocrite for that. I don't know. I don't know if I said anything hypocritical about this. But do we think the archetype is really existing for a purpose? Because I think the archetype is slowly but surely being erased, as Intelligent Systems doesn't want to give the player too many units of the same base class anymore. Intelligent Systems, look at Engage. Look at the three houses. Look at three houses, everyone started off as a lord or, a noble or a commoner. And anyone could be any class, even though some units were more given aptitudes to push them towards particular class routes more likely, or different skills and abilities that would make them better in certain classes. But anyone could be anything. And so players had to make those differentiation choices from a nearly blank slate, like just reading the information. And then you get to Engage, and do you ever get two units of the same class, like right next to each other? Not really. The closest you get is like Louis and then Jade, and even then they're of different weapon types, so I guess you could argue, oh, they're different weapon types is the the green and green of this, I guess, I don't know. But it just, you're highlighting a healer and a mage and saying that's the Christmas archetype, and I'm saying those are two very different units that do not match up in a mechanical standpoint. They're just themed that way for visuals and story and all that type of stuff. They're themed red and green because people latch on to red and green and say, hey, this is a duo. And that's all there is anymore. And Intelligent Systems doesn't want to give you two units of the same class because they don't want to feel boring. They don't want to make cookie-cutter boring units. I mean, what was it? I think Bopper said it in his unit feel video that a lot of Christmas Cavs don't have great unit feel because they feel generic, they feel muddy, they feel unclear on why they're supposed to... why you're getting two of them. Are they supposed to be different? Why? Because players want units to feel different when they get them, and Christmas Cavaliers don't often do that. And the only ones that really feel different are the ones that give you something really different and really to think about. Again, FE4, FE5, kind of, if you want to count that. Shadow Dragon DS, and Fates. Not Fates, Awakening. And Awakening. Those 4 give you something different to think about. The rest don't really. Minor stat differences. Stuff to nerd out about in the back room with your wikis and forums, but not something that really comes up in gameplay when you're just playing it for the first time. But what do you think? First of all, happy holidays. What do you think of the Christmas Cavs archetype? What do you think of the Christmas unit archetype? Is it a holdout from a bygone era that we need to get rid of? Is it something that is still useful, but we need to be more picky about what we call it? Or is it something that everyone's just going to be using anyway? Let me know in the comments down below what you think. Thank you so much. Have a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, whatever holiday it is that you celebrate. I understand I'm probably late for Hanukkah. And until next time, this is Mythful Zenith signing out.